I start off with a canvas that I've already thrown paint at. I take my canvases out in the backyard, all my paint, and I drip and throw and splatter paint all over. You can kind of see some brown that goes up and green that goes up that looks like stems and leaves. Then after that, I bring it in the house, make sure it's dried thoroughly. Then I take my heavy body acrylic paints and decide which colors I'm going to be using. Here, obviously, I'm using a lavender and a purple. I believe the brands that I use are Master's Touch and Liquitex. I'm using a rounded palette knife here. When I load the paint onto the palette knife, approximately in the middle, I have my darker color, and then I load up the tip with the lighter color. This way, when I apply it to the canvas, I get a little bit more of that lighter color on the tips of my flowers, and it blends out the darker colors within the petals themselves. Since I've thrown paint at this canvas prior, there's quite a bit of texture already on it. So when I'm using the palette knife, I have a lot of paint on it, and I'm not applying real heavy pressure, otherwise that canvas will come through. It's okay if a little bit of the canvas colors come through your flowers in certain areas. You just don't want a whole lot coming through. As far as the composition of the flowers, I want to have an odd amount of flowers usually. There's something more visually appealing about that. And then I need to think about the size of the flowers and the colors of the flowers. First, I usually put in flowers that are going to be, I want set back more into the background. So I'll use my darker colors on my first layers. And then I probably use some lighter colors or brighter colors if I'm going to add another layer on top where the flowers might overlap each other. Whenever I do the middle of the flower, I also need to think about colors. I don't necessarily need to make my flowers realistic colored if I want. Next, I have some paint in a squeeze bottle with a very narrow tip. I'm putting in things that are going to look like stems and leaves. Again, as with the flowers, I want to use my darker colors first, and then if I go to more layers, I'm going to make the lighter colors be the next step. I've switched to a metallic silver color, and I'm going to be putting in some little spikes on these stems here just to give some accent. So I have some things that look like flowers but aren't exactly flowers that are still decorative. When this dries, it makes a nice bright sparkly color. Even with these stems and leaves, I need to think about placement and the overall composition of my picture. Keeping with my need to have odd numbers of things, here it appears that there's actually 4. I have one above that left flower and one below. I did them at the different times, but they appear to be one and the same. So I'm taking the brown bottle and I'm putting in another stem, and I'm going to put some more of the little silver leaves on it. They kind of look like fern leaves to me, but in the wrong colors. Now I'm adding some small accent flowers. I'm using that silver color again with a little bit of that lavender in the main flowers. These would be more like flower buds. I'm not going to even put stems on these. I'm just going to have them floating in there. There's enough busyness in the background that your eyes will apply stems to them. I'm just going to have 3 little small leaves or petals on them, I guess they would be. Notice the little purple dots in some areas. They're kind of hard to see. There's some there on the left-hand side above that bottom flower. Those look really nice in person. It's a product from Folk Arts called Glitterific Polka Dots. And it's basically little pieces of large glitter dots suspended in clear or a little bit translucent purple. And they look really nice because they look like they're just floating there in water or dew. I really love how this heavy-bodied acrylic paint gives this painting depth. It was almost like doing a sculpture. The last step is to give your picture a gloss varnish. I use Liquitex Professional Gloss Medium and Varnish. There's different levels of gloss and there's even matte. I would definitely say use one of the glosses. And then also use a sponge brush and then just have a container that you can use that you throw away. Here you'll see me applying the gloss to the painting. This type of painting I noticed was pretty hard to use this sponge brush, but I think you get a nice even texture in the end. You just have to be really careful not to have it on thick. You don't want it to look milky at all. That's not going to dry well. And you want to make sure that you get all of the bubbles out. You can use a torch and that helps break up the bubbles as well. Don't forget to gloss the sides of your painting. My canvas is about 1 inch thick on the sides, so I want to make sure I get a good coat on those and make sure it doesn't drip off the bottom. You can't see it here, but my picture is propped up on 2 yogurt containers. That way it's not going to stick to the table or anything. I usually use 2 coats of this gloss. I wouldn't do more than 3. If you get too much on there, it can begin to look milky. This paint is a glossy paint, so I can easily get away with just 1 coat if I'd like. But I want it really nice and sealed. With the texture in this painting, everybody's going to want to touch it. You might as well seal it up really nice. Once it's nice and dry and it's hanging on the wall, it might get dusty, and you can easily just take a damp cloth over the top of it and dust it off. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button.